It was number 3 on I had my like top 5. Here's the things I want to fix. So like defenses was number 1. There was like some gemling stuff in there, and we had chaos hits. Chaos hits, and by correlation, Archon.
Yes, Mark. Please give us more options for chaos hit. Give us more options for chaos Archon, and just anything else that can help elevate this stupid, stubborn build that I'm trying to cobble together. Okay, thanks, bye. Hey guys, this is Kenny17, and this is my stubborn spell build trying to lean even further into pure chaos with as little auxiliary support as possible. We're talking about no crit, no dot, no COC, no COEA, no cast on minion death, just good old button clicking, a hope, and a dream. As expected, this 0.4 build is surprisingly viable, but has an obvious power ceiling as discussed previously. Referring to both the interviews and the patch notes before 0.5 release, however, I'm seeing more options and some possible interesting synergies that can take this archetype even further. After all, who doesn't like insane theory crafting the week before League start and pretend like we know what we're talking about? For now, I hope you're enjoying the 0.4 montage as usual, and discuss soon. Cheers! Welcome back. I hope you've enjoyed the montage as usual. For this video, I want to talk about 2 things. Number 1, I've made some more updates from the previous 0.4 pure chaos build that I wanted to share with you all. As usual, we're stubbornly trying to rely on chaos damage scaling without any of the other usual crutches, including crit, dot, and cast on synergies. Overall, the build is definitely not overpowered, but I'd say pretty viable, with about 10 to 11 seconds needed to clear a T3 pinnacle with about 10 million health. However, it goes without saying that an obvious power ceiling exists here. Number 2 is going to be a bit more forward-looking. I want to dive a bit more into theory crafting and see what some of the new changes in 0.5 can further elevate our pure chaos build by ways of either additional damage scaling or expanded options for better build optimization and synergies. This part will of course contain a lot more speculations, but I'll try to keep the guesses as quote-unquote educated as possible, if you will. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So right off the bat, what exactly is this build? This is a pretty straightforward spell build where we try to focus on chaos damage type and scaling. The unique spin here is that instead of trying to rely on traditional essence string and contagion setup, we are leveraging original sin here for 100% elemental to chaos damage conversion. Outside of all the scaling implications, this string drastically opens up our skill gem options while leaning into chaos and give us a lot more freedom and skill combinations to play with. Not to mention that it actually also opens up a lot of infusion and power charge synergies that we'll touch upon later. For the rest of the build discussion, I'll talk about 3 key aspects, which are mapping, bossing, and defense, without going too much into the details, given the significant amount of changes that will happen in 0.5. Also FYI, this is a Lich Ascendancy on the Witch class. Diving into our method to do mapping, we're essentially relying on Despair and Dodra's Undoing lineage support. If you're not familiar, Despair is a curse that generates a large inscription on the ground that lowers enemy chaos resistance after a brief delay, just like this. Dodra's Undoing, however, turns that into cursed ground that detonates enemies in that area for a large amount of chaos damage that you see here. To further help scale this damage, we are also slotting in Impending Doom, which is just another chaos damage source with its own source of scaling, as well as Estus Radiance. This essentially allows our chaos damage to also contribute to shock, so that when we're doing multiple applications of this curse, subsequent hits from your curse ground will deal more damage and allow you to take down tankier mobs a little bit more quickly. Shock is also important here because killing mobs with Shock Ailment will allow Mana Remnant to turn on, that you see here, which will generate a lot of remnants on the ground for us to pick up, allow us to replenish mana, which is also important for our survivability that we'll discuss later in the defense section. Going to 0.5, I know there's already going to be some rework announced associated with Dodri's Undoing. TLDR, it seems that this skill will actually crave frogs, which then automatically target nearby foes and jump over for Chaos Explosion. I really like the flavor update here from GGG, and honestly kind of reminds me a lot of the D3 Witch Doctor, but the viability of this skill in 0.5 will obviously need a lot more testing, since there are a lot of unknowns. Things like damage scaling, time to explosion due to frog creation, frog speed, explosion delays, etc. will all be relevant. A quick additional comment on the mapping rotation is that in the event if you run into rares with a lot of health, you can also supplement your damage by casting 1 to 2 stack of Living Bomb on the rare. Living Bomb essentially causes an additional explosion for a bunch of damage if the target takes enough damage or dies, leaving behind a Fire Infusion remnant. So this is perfectly synergistic with your Despair and Dodri's Undoing rotation as you deal enough damage to trigger the main damage explosion from Living Bomb. Additionally, with the Fire Infusion generated during the mapping scenario, you can also pick those up and leverage those Fire Infusion for your Spell Slinger Socketed skill, which is a Fireball with Wither. Combined with Silence Temper, you essentially have a chance to create an overall Fireball Nova that covers the entire screen and declutter the map very quickly. Moving on to bossing, everything really just kind of revolves around maximizing our Comet damage here. To start, since we're not using Cast on Crit with Comet, we can actually socket in this lineage support gem called Zarok's Refrain, which just lets your spell echo 3 additional times with increased area of effect and no damage penalty. So that means every time when I cast Comet, I'm going to get 4 volleys of Comet from a single cast, again with no damage penalty, which is really neat. The tricky part about this build and doing bossing is really just skill rotation, which is honestly kind of a pain. As a start, the first thing you want to do is slap down your Sigil Power, which give you a bonus to spell damage, and this bonus increases with the more mana that you spend. While in this circle, you will start rotating between your Despair and your Living Bomb, and the purpose here is to do some damage, but most importantly generate Fire Infusion. Once Fire Infusion is generated, you need to go over, pick up the Fire Infusion, come back to the Sigil as relevant, and then fire off your Fireball with your weapon set 1. After this case, the boss will be debuffed with Wither and a reasonable amount of damage taken along with Despair stacked up. At that point, you are able to cast Comet, and during the Comet fall, you want to keep adding Living Bomb onto the boss because you want to be picking up Fire Infusion for the later sequence of the Comet that falls down within the same echo. If this whole rotation sounds complicated, that's because it is. And trust me, this is actually already after a lot of optimization and me trying to cut down buttons. Realistically, in the bossing scenario, you'll only be able to stick to this for slow moving and or even just kind of large stationary bosses. And also, you'll probably need to run a lot of practices before you can kind of achieve reasonable consistency to get the damage numbers that you're seeing in the T3 Pinnacle montage. Finally, we can quickly talk about defense, which is really just relying on Mind Over Matter or MOM without actually picking Mind Over Matter. Mind Over Matter, for those of us who are unfamiliar, is a keystone here that says all damage is taken from mana before life, but it also gives you 50% less mana recovery rate. This steep penalty applies not only to mana regen, but also to mana recoup, mana flask recovery, etc. So what we really want is get the upside and none of the downside. To do this, we are using Cloak of Defiance here, which gives us 50% of damage taken as mana instead of life, without any mana regen downside. To add to this, we're also taking Grey Wolf's Rune of Willpower, which gives us an extra 15%. Added together, that's already a total of 65% mana taken before life. You add this on top of some notables and minor nodes that's scattered across the tree, such as here, here, as well as over on the east side of the tree here. overall we have about 94% of damage taken from Mana Before Life, which is good for our build. If you do want to shoot for about 100%, there is another cluster over here. But again, take note, we're getting all of the benefits of MOM without actually taking any of the detriments or the con. To further lean into this defense, we're also taking Eldritch Battery that you see here. Quite simply, it converts all energy shield to mana, but it doubles the mana cost. And that's why I have about 4k of mana pool that you see here. The mana cost increase is actually not that significant, given that our mana regen during combat with Arcane Surge is over 1k. This large mana pool also actually works into our damage scaling a little bit, since our Unholy Might magnitude is also related to max mana. Lastly, I know you can significantly boost mana regen here for better survivability with Quipolato's Thesis. Unfortunately, this is a character in the Standard League. I imagine after League Migration, we'll be a lot beefier as well. So hopefully this short section has given you a sense of some of the key aspects used in this stubborn Pure Chaos build. And if you have any more questions, feel free to comment down below. Moving on now to some exciting possibilities and potential synergies in 0.5, I want to first talk about this new Archon type called Archon of Undeath. This is covered as a single line in the patch notes here, but if we deep dive a little bit more, this can be a potential game changer for Chaos spell builds overall, assuming this is indeed geared towards Chaos builds in general. For now, I think that assumption is reasonable, given what Mark has alluded to in the ZiggyD interview earlier in this video. There's no information available on what Archon of Undeath is at the moment, but we can use the existing Elemental Archon to do some educated guesses. Currently in the game, Elemental Archon gives a bonus of 25% more elemental damage, makes you deal no non-elemental damage, and gives significantly more ailment buildup for freeze, ignite, and shock. If we assume a quote-unquote symmetric game design for the Archon of Undeath, that would directly translate to more chaos damage bonus, restricts you to dealing chaos damage only, which for us is not a big deal, as well as giving some additional chaos-related bonuses. These bonuses can probably range anything from Wither or Curse related, such as Magnitude Increase, Chaos skill duration related for Chaos Dots, or even minion/defense related given the naming scheme here. Overall, if our guess is correct, this can provide a substantial damage scaling vector for Chaos spell builds. Referring back to our 0.4 build, there are definitely some passive tree inefficiencies that can be better leveraged for new Archon allocations if such options existed. In terms of gaining this new Archon buff, I'd imagine we'll have many ways to do so with a relatively low bar to clear, if, again, this is similar to Elemental Archon. Currently for Elemental Archon, we can gain this buff through Lineage Support Gems, notables on the passive tree, and or even through Ascendancy passives. For 0.5, I expect new Lineage Support Gems and notables to enable this new Archon type. And even though for now, no Ascendancy changes has been announced with regard to Archon of Undeath, I wouldn't cross this option off the table yet going into the future, especially for witch-based ascendancies. Overall, there's still a lot of assumptions and speculations around this new Archon type, but I'm very optimistic in this type expanding the Chaos archetype by giving us more interesting build options and damage scaling. Another 0.5 patch note that might also be relevant here will be the change to the Blackflame ring. Originally, this ring allows for enemies to take chaos damage from your ignite. With the introduction of the Blackflame Covenant Keystone 0.3, there are already some redundancies with this unique, so I'm not really surprised that GGG decided to rework this ring for 0.5. Post-rework, this ring essentially gives you three things. 1. Wither debuff applies now to fire damage. 2. Ignite now does chaos damage. And 3. Wither does not expire on ignited enemies. Taken together, this actually supports more of a fire/chaos hybrid build, and seems to encourage experimentation for both fire hit scaling as well as chaos ignite scaling. Keeping in mind that fire damage is usually broken into two parts, the hit part and the damage over time or ignite part. By keeping the hit part as fire and ignite converted to chaos, as well as giving wither efficacy for both, you can essentially prioritize wither stacking for overall damage increase. Additional debuff setups such as curse type, choosing between elemental weakness or despair, as well as damage scaling, choosing between fire or chaos, hit or ignite magnitude, will heavily depend on what you like to focus on for your specific build. My initial take here is that this rework can enable a plethora of different options for both attack and spell-based builds. For attack-based, I can see this being used on a melee, mace-based build, focusing on fire damage while using Zoph's Pyre for additional chaos damage and flammability, and leaning into Wither for additional damage scaling. On the spell-based build side, I can definitely see an Incinerate-based build leaning heavily into chaos damage scaling and ignite magnitude and stacking. FYI, the patch notes did nerf the Incinerate and Oil Ground interaction, but as far as we know, Incinerate itself should still be able to stack Ignite, similar to Flame Breath on the Wyvern skill. One last thing I also want to note here is that given the interesting rework to the Blackflame ring, I do think this would be a replacement for Original Sin, rather than an addition to. There is little benefit for you to take both, and having both ring slots occupied by unique items significantly reduces your defense and resistance capping capabilities in the endgame. A final note before we wrap. I do not think that the common nerf for 0.5 will significantly impact our pure chaos build, which by the way is about a 25% reduction in the base damage. One advantage of chaos spell builds via Original Sin that we're using is that the entire skill set of elemental spells are open to you. If common is nerfed, a host of alternative high damage spells are also available instead, such as Firestorm, Flame Blast, or even Incinerate. So while we'll have to do some work to find the proper spell and test its efficacy in the endgame, this nerf would not impact us nearly as much as some other COC common builds might be impacted. Which even for those folks, I would imagine that a direct switch over to COC Spark or Arc will do. In conclusion, we put together a good endgame build in 0.4 using only pure chaos without any other crutch such as dot, crit, or cast on supports. Going into 0.5, the added synergies should be able to raise the ceiling on this build archetype and allow us to push even further into the endgame. In particular, I'm super excited about the addition of the new Archon type for further chaos damage and utility scaling, again assuming this is indeed an Archon of the chaos type. Zooming out a bit, I do plan to do a few different things in 0.5. First, I'll probably league start as a monk and do an updated variation of the Liu Kang build that I did in 0.4. I have some cool ideas that hopefully works out, and with the new martial art ascendancy as super interesting to leverage. Second, I'm still working on a Spire of Ire Chaos attack build, so I do expect an update there, though that character will be in the Standard League. Lastly, I'll be reviewing the Chaos spell synergies discussed here, as well as a revisit on the warrior/minion archetype that I love to do every patch, focused on Chopper Chopper. There are just a few of the things on my mind, and given the longer 0.5 league time before 1.0 drop, I'll probably have other interesting ideas to test and share as well. All in all, kudos to ZiggyD again for making this game engaging and deep, and I look forward to a lot more theory crafting, build discussion with y'all in the upcoming league. Hope you all stay safe and healthy, and cheers!